Recently, we had an incredibly bizarre standoff between the Bureau of Land Management, which is a federal governmental organization, and some landowners, specifically one Mr. Bundy in Nevada. So here's the situation as the Associated Press explains it. The Bureau revoked Bundy's grazing rights after he stopped paying grazing fees and disregarded federal court orders to remove his animals. So what Mr. Bundy had been doing is sending his cows to graze on federal land. And so the government would then say, okay, all right, but other people pay licensing or grazing fees for that. So because it's not your land and you're using land that isn't yours, and so there's a fee for that. You're running a business and it's the normal thing to charge you. And in fact, let me give you the exact number here. 16,000 public land ranchers do that every single year. Well, Mr. Bundy disagrees. He says, you know what? I don't think this is federal land. I think it's Nevada land. Why, that's a fascinating opinion that you have, but that's not the case, right? And even if it was state land, then you would presumably still have to pay for grazing because it's not your land. No, undeterred, he goes on. And in fact, he's been doing this for decades. So finally, the Bureau of Land Management was like, look, dude, if you're going to keep bringing your cows into our land and not pay for it, like everyone else is, well, then we're going to take your cows. I would have done this approximately 20 years ago. So here's what they did. The 400 cows gathered during the roundup were short of Bureau of Land Management's goal of 900 cows that it says have been trespassing on U.S. land without required grazing permits for over 20 years. In fact, if he had been paying the grazing fees all along, like other ranchers, he now would have paid the U.S. government $1 million. That's what he owes them. But he's decided that he doesn't want to pay them, so what did he do? He and a bunch of friends showed up with guns. And here's where the story gets interesting. Continuing with the AP here. The Bureau of Land Management took to action Saturday afternoon after hundreds of states' rights protesters, including militia and Tea Party members, showed up at corrals outside Mesquite to demand the animals return to rancher Cliven Bundy. So what action did they take? They gave his cows back. So did he pay the $1 million that he owed the government? Nope. Because his buddies showed up. They're like, all right, here's your 400 back. In fact, here's more details. Some protesters were armed with handguns and rifles at the corrals and at an earlier nearby rally. Great, we now literally have the OK Corral, right? Where people are showing up with guns and rifles and saying, all right, we'd like to do this. So why did they do it? Neil Korn's Bureau of Land Management chief says, based on information about conditions on the ground and in consultation with law enforcement, we have made a decision to conclude the cattle gather because of our serious concerns about the safety of employees and members of the public. That's amazing. So these guys show up and they say, well, we were afraid they were going to kill federal government officials, so we gave them their cows back. Now, some people are celebrating this, saying like, ha ha, you see that? We stood up to the federal government. I mean, I don't know what that means. So can I stand up to the federal government and not pay my taxes? And be like, ah, yeah, so what? I got an Uzi. That doesn't make any sense. You can't do that. And think about the logical extension to that. What if everybody started doing it? Well, my guess is that they would have a slightly different reaction if a bunch of guys in Compton decided that they weren't going to follow whatever rules the federal government had, whether it's taxes or anything else, and they owed the government a lot of money. And then a bunch of African Americans show up with rifles and handguns by a federal government building and say, we'll shoot federal officials if you don't give us, what, our stuff back. Let's say that they took their cars, whatever it might have been. Give us our car back, so otherwise we'll start shooting people. Do you think the story goes the same way? Now, Sean Hannity apparently has been praising this guy to, all right, Cliven Bundy standing up to the government. Guys show up in Compton in front of a federal building and with guns and rifles. You think Sean Hannity defends them too? All right, how about, I mean, pick any other scenario where it's not white ranchers, right? How about we're here in Los Angeles, some folks from East LA decide that, you know what, we're going to park our cars over there in the right in front of the federal building. And there's a federal building in Los Angeles. And then we're not going to pay any fines. We're not going to pay any parking. And if you give us trouble, we'll show up with weaponry. How do you think that goes? This is madness. There's nothing to celebrate here, quite the opposite. This is a disaster, man. You can't set a precedent where people just show up with guns and they get to break the law. How about if immigrants came in and said, well, yeah, we're not following the law. Yeah, we didn't get any documentation. We're here now. But it's okay, we came with guns. This is a disaster, man, because this is going to encourage all those people out there who think that they don't have to pay the federal government anything, they don't have to listen to any laws, to grab their guns and threaten people.